We have this central triage and health facility at Baguio Convention Center. And our 6 hospitals have 79 bed wards, 219 isolation beds, 30 ICU beds, 18 mechanical ventilators, and 2 testing laboratories. We now have 40 teams, contact tracing teams, and 781 members. So we actually, in January of 2020, the first hammer was dropped with the cancellation of the Panagbenga festivities. And then from March 13, before the March 17 ECQ in Luzon, we have already suspended classes, border controls are in place, and our legislative branch passed 5 resolutions on health. March 17 was the start of the ECQ in Baguio. And since March 22, we have been implementing our survival gardens. 30 resolutions were passed to protect MSMEs, senior citizens, PWDs, and women. On the first case of COVID-19 in Baguio, that was March 23, Lindy Hotel became a community isolation unit. And since March 30 onwards, there had been 29 ordinances and resolutions on various COVID-related spending. Since April until June, the social amelioration program had been put into place. There had been a lot of memos on lockdowns, ordinances and resolutions were passed on law and order. May 18, Baguio entered into GCQ, and June 1, we were at MGCQ. This is the phase where we are in right now. We are experiencing clustering in our cases, but starting August 10, the 100 million financial assistance to our MSMEs were passed. We have obligated 234 million on COVID-related funds. And from August 22 onwards, our tracing efficiency of 1:37 became 1:23 because of clustering, and we have 70% tracking within 24 hours. We are looking forward to next week, where we take our first step towards that gradual, calibrated, and safe opening. We hope that we will skip this phase on widespread infections and get into the herd or the management and elimination of the virus already, but should it happen, Baguio is ready. This is a plot of the positive cases in our city, starting from the first case on March 23 until September 17. The city has created response clusters, which are tasked to implement actions and attain the objectives defined in our 8-phase algorithm. The response clusters are initiated according to the need and the events that are happening, starting with activation to deployment, and eventually, their deactivation as the threat will be eliminated. As of today, all response clusters are on full activation. This city has set short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. Our short-term strategies is to consolidate our health response infrastructure, to continue our survival gardens and food forest programs, and to synchronize the geometry of our barangay puroks to the zoning containment strategy. Our midterm strategies would be to avoid work disruption and ensure the mobility of all our citizens, even when public transportation is shut down. That's why we're planning for a connected micro-mobility network, where all our citizens can move from their settlements to their workspaces using biking, pedestrian, or our biodiversity corridors, the MMDA recommendations that were given to us, as well as our shared streets objective. Our goal is also to incrementally improve our urban spaces to become safe whenever the shelter-in-place order is implemented. Hence, we are planning to implement a safe shelters audit. And to help our MSMEs, who are the source of 70% of taxes paid in the city, we want to develop, together with our public-private sector partners, an innovation and startup incubation program, which we hope will give rise to the 21st century MSMEs, who will have products and services, as well as business plans that could weather the impacts of health and other disasters. For our long-term strategy, we are looking at a hybrid comprehensive land use plan and development plan, where it is all of the above: defense plan, continuity plan, and conservation plan. Our tourism and recovery as well as resiliency plan will be presented by Engineer Aloysius Mapalo, our City Tourism Officer.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Architect Donna. So let me present to you what we have planned out for our road to reopening of tourism here in Baguio City. It has been nationwidely disseminated and announced that we are opening on September 22. But I think there are a lot of misinterpretations. I would just like to correct that on September 22, we are actually launching the systems for the gradual reopening of tourism activities or travel for leisure, rest, and recreation here in Baguio City. And I would like to show you a timeline as how we were able to think this over and without having to compromise risk factors when we start opening our tourism. So as mentioned, everything had been triggered with the cancellation of Panagbinga starting in February 1. And then there were announcements already of quarantine from March 16, May 1 for GCQ, and then May 16 for MGCQ. So this is when our focus was on the crisis management and relief operations. So practically, this is when we actually lost an estimated of 1.6 billion tourism industry in terms of potential gross receipts, because this is our summer season, which is actually our peak season here in Baguio City for tourism. So as early as April 12, we started consulting with the stakeholders, our private sectors in the business and tourist industries, to start discussing how we can be able to rehabilitate and at the same time recover the major industry here in Baguio City. We have a draft of the recovery plan as early as April, and this was actually presented last May 25 to Department of Tourism Secretary Bernadette Puyat and the other agencies of DOT, including the undersecretaries and assistant secretaries. And this was commended by Secretary Puyat and thus made us push forward to our planning sessions. So between that period, from June to July, that is when we started rehabilitating our parks, our tourist attractions. We also started thinking of developing contactless tourist registration, which is the Visita. I will discuss that a little later. We also started engaging with tourism-oriented and tourism-related establishment for their safety protocols, and at the same time, the issuances of certificate of authority to operate. On August 16, we were able to release our initial draft of guidelines in our reopening of tourism. And we received a lot of reactions at that time, so we needed a lot of consultations during that period from August 16 to September. Consultations were made with the City Council, with the different LGUs in the Cordillera region. There was even a Zoom conference also with the regional IATF. But the most important consultation was made in August 20, where we held a consultation with the medical and health sector of the city, as it is a very important component when we start opening our tourism. And then on September 1, we were able to meet with the provinces and the governors of the Region 1 and started to plan out a possible collaboration to be called a tourism bubble in Northern Luzon, the Ridge and Reef Travel Corridor. So after then, we moved forward with TWG planning, starting with local planning here in Baguio City with the different sectors, including the health sector, of course. And then just last week, we also had planning sessions with the different regional counterparts in Region 1. And then we were able to come up with a consolidated guideline, which I will present to you a little later, so that we can be ready for the September 22 launching of the systems that will gradually reopen our tourism here in Baguio City. As I have mentioned, our reopening has been thought out since April, and we were able to already at that time find out some projections. As you can see, we have these phases in our recovery, the mitigation phase, transition phase, and recovery phase, where it is indicated that September could be our reopening period, as we have thought out in April. This is actually a timeline of which tourism-related establishments can open gradually, even starting as early as June towards September. But all of these are very dynamic guidelines because it is mentioned in our recovery plan that this will be subject to actual situations and issuances from the National Task Force. So we consider this as our reset button to ensure that our reopening will not be the same as before, meaning our tourism will now be observing a responsible and sustainable tourism principles when we start our tourism industry here in Baguio City. When we have offered to release the initial guidelines, we received a lot of feedback and saw some issues that needed to be resolved at that time. We heard, for example, that Baguio will become an attractive destinations once we open. So that will cause a lot of fear, surge of influx of tourists, possible overwhelming of borders. Of course, the uncontrolled exposure and transmission can also be possible. Issue number two, we are aware that COVID cases in the city is still increasing, so we are looking at our healthcare capacity. Number three, many local and residents are still negative about tourism. Perhaps this is because of the usual fear of tourist problems, how we experience it before pandemic, like for example, irresponsible tourists, traffic, and a lot of people, or even environmental degradation. And issue number four, even tourism establishments are looking at the gradual opening to be non-profitable because this is going to be slow and we have a lot of requirements and a lot of criteria, so that means it may not be still good business. But our principles in reopening are just these 3S, slowly, safely, and surely. So meaning this will be gradual, we'll start with a small number, and we can increase as we go along. But definitely, still everything will still be regulated. But all guidelines will be very dynamic so that we can be sure that we are always adapting to the situations. This is a summary of the procedure for the entry of tourists. Right now, we are introducing a system where we will have to require travelers to pre-register prior to travel. In this pre-registration, this is when they need to upload requirements such as identification, current photo, and the most important is the health declaration form. And in the health declaration form, they will have to also upload a latest COVID-19 test that shows a negative result. In the pre-registration, it is also important that our tourists, for the initial phase, that they have a pre-booking with hotels, and at the same time, they have declared itinerary. So we will not allow any movement that is beyond the declared itinerary as assisted by DOT-accredited tour operators. When they arrive, we will have the usual triage protocol. And as an option, we also can be able to offer testing upon arrival. This is just a validation of the health declaration made by our tourists. And there will be hotel SOPs, so standard operating procedures, when they check in. Like for example, contactlessly and digitally, they will be able to find out if our tourists went through the process, they have all the health declaration complete and went through triage. And when all of these SOPs have been observed, the movement of our tourists will be definitely monitored with the assistance of tour guides and tour operators of the city. To assist all of this and to have contactless, paperless transactions in all of our destinations and attractions, we are developing Baguio Visita, which is a visitor information and travel assistance, which is an online assistance website. And this is what we will launch also on September 22. And it has 4 major components. First is the visitor dashboard, where our tourists can register. Establishments and site portal, where our tourist-related establishments will have their own portal so that they can also determine their capacity and they can limit the number of people inside the attraction. And at the same time, it has a check-in and check-out counter digitally that will become part of our contact tracing database. An admin interface can be able to interactively or dynamically also control the regulations and limit or even limit the number and set more criteria. In the future, we will be able to launch a mobile application that is the counterpart of the website. Last September 1, as we were able to successfully discuss with the governors of Region 1, we were able to have a memorandum of understanding to explore a tourism bubble in North Luzon, which we are calling Ridge and Reef Baguio Region 1 Travel Corridor, which we will also launch on Tuesday, September 22. This is between and among the LGUs Baguio City, Pangasinan, La Union, Ilocos Sur, and Ilocos Norte. And part of the issues that we undertook as part of our planning sessions in the region are the following: issues on profitability, public health and safety. And also we made a preparedness checklist for all of the LGUs that will be part of the tourist or travel corridor. And as you can see, these are also the things that were discussed by Dr. Galpo as a requirement before we can be able to be ready to open for tourists. Our corridor is going to be implemented in 3 phases. So initially, it's going to be a small number among and within the LGUs in the bubble. And as we increase or expand our market, we may be able to consider also tourists from outside of the bubble. For example, Region 2 or Region 3 that has the same level of risk. And perhaps nationally also, when we can be able to identify tourists that can travel by air with the Lawag Airport as entry point, or by land where Pangasinan and Baguio City as entry point. And those are what we have been preparing for to launch on Tuesday, this September 22, the Ridge and Reef, Baguio and Region 1 Travel Corridor, and the Baguio Visita. Definitely, we are opening a Baguio City that will be very safe. Thank you very much.
Maraming salamat, Engineer Aloysius Mapalo, the Baguio City Tourism Officer. Again, thank you to Team Cordillera, Team Baguio for your presentations. From our regional overview, regional and Baguio City overview of the situation, including the plans, we move on now to Code Team reports. But before that, let's watch first the audiovisual presentation about the National Action Plan Phase 2.
Sa gitna ng krisis na kinakaharap ng bansa, makakatiyak ang mga mamamayan na patuloy na pagbubutihin ng ating pamahalaan ang pagtugon sa pandemyang COVID-19 upang mapagtagumpayan ang lahat ng pagsubok na dulot nito.
Our National Action Plan against COVID-19 is also strong at ginagawa namin lahat ang magagawa para sugpuin itong COVID.
Noong Marso ng taong ito, binuo ng Administrasyong Duterte ang Phase 1 ng National Action Plan against COVID-19. Ang NAP ay ang estratehiya ng pamahalaan na National Government-enabled, Local Government Unit-led at People-centered para tugunan ang pandemyang COVID-19 sa pamagitan ng pagsasama-sama at paggamit sa mga resources, manpower at expertise ng ating gobyerno. Ang Phase 1 ng National Action Plan against COVID-19 ay nakatuon sa pag-iwas, pagkontrol at pagpuksa sa virus sa ilalim ng health sector at gayon din sa pag-iwas sa mga negatibong epekto nito sa pamagitan ng paghahatid ng mga pangunahing serbisyo sa mamamayan. Habang unti-unti nating binubuksan ang ekonomiya ng ating bansa, ipinatutupad na rin ng administrasyon ang Phase 2 ng NAP na nakatuon sa health at economic recovery ng bansa. Ang NAP Phase 2 ay batay sa Hammer and Dance Theory. Ang Hammer ay tumutukoy sa estratehiya ng pagkontrol ng pagkalat ng COVID-19 tulad ng mahigpit na pagpapatupad ng community quarantine measures sa mga target na lugar, Ang dance component naman ay nagbibigay daan sa pagbubukas ng ekonomiya at sa pagpapagaan sa epekto ng pandemya sa ekonomiya ng bansa. Ang NAP Phase 2 ay nananatiling nakaangkla sa estratehiya ng gobyerno na tinatawag na PDITR na naglalayo na maiwasan at makontrol ang pagkalat ng virus. Ang ibig sabihin ng PDITR ay Prevent, Detect, Isolate, Treat, and Reintegrate. Ang prevention component ay tumutukoy sa pagpapatupad ng minimum health standards tulad ng paghuhugas ng kamay, physical distancing, pagsusuot ng face mask, personal na kalinisan at community lockdown. Ang second component naman ay estratehiyang detection at kasama dito ang pagpapatupad ng agresibong contact tracing at expanded community testing. Ang ikatlong component ay ang estratehiyang isolation kung saan mayroong probisyon ng isolation facilities para sa mga mild o asymptomatic cases, community protocols para sa mga positive cases at construction support para sa mga government hospitals. Ang ika-apat na component ay ang estratehiyang treatment kung saan kasama ang One Hospital Command na isa sa mga pinakabagong hakbang ng task force upang mapadali ang pag-access ng mga Pilipino sa medical care at treatment, ang Mega Temporary Treatment and Monitoring Facility at ang Public and Private Referral Hospitals. Ang ikalima at huling component ay ang estratehiyang reintegration sa lipunan ng mga gumaling na pasyente. Ang mga pasyenteng gumaling ay dapat pa ring sumunod sa minimum health standards at dapat ay nababatid nila na posibleng sila ay mahawa muli. Kapag siguradong nasusunod ang estratehiyang ito, maaari nang simulan ang implementasyon ng ating transisyon sa new normal. Ang iba't ibang uri ng zoning or targeted lockdown ay barangay lockdown, block lockdown, block and house lockdown, street lockdown, house lockdown, and building lockdown. Ang zoning ay mayroon ding 4 na kategorya. Una ay ang critical zone o ang mga lugar kung saan ang paunang bilang ng mga kaso ay natukoy sa nakaraang 7 araw. Pangalawa ay ang containment zone o ang mga lugar na walang bagong kaso ngunit katabi ng isang lugar na ikinategorya bilang CRZ. Pangatlo naman ang buffer zone o ang mga lugar na walang bagong kaso ngunit katabi ng lugar na isinailalim sa kategoryang CZ.
Example, irresponsible
At
tourists,
panghuli, ang
traffic,
area
and a lot
outside
of
buffer
people,
zone
or
o ang
even
lahat na
environmental
natitirang mga lugar
degradation.
na walang bagong kaso
And issue
at
number
hindi
4,
nakategorya bilang CZ o BZ. Ang Zoning Containment Strategy na ipatutupad ng Local Task Force ay naglalayong mapigilan ang pagkalat ng COVID-19 at mabawasan ang epekto nito sa lokal na ekonomiya sa pamagitan ng contact tracing, testing, isolation at treatment ng mga tinatawag na suspect, probable at confirmed cases. Samantala, sinisiguro ng pamahalaan na mayroong mga hakbang na ipapatupad upang matiyak na makakamit natin ang ating layunin na makabawi ang ekonomiya at mabigyan ng komportableng buhay ang bawat mamamayan sa gitna ng pandemya. Ang gobyerno ay patuloy na nakatuon sa pagpapahusay sa healthcare capacity ng bansa sa pamagitan ng pagtatayo ng karagdagang ICU at isolation beds, testing laboratories, referral hospitals, swabbing centers at quarantine facilities sa buong bansa. Ang mga medical frontliners mula sa gobyerno at pribadong sektor ay binibigyan ng proteksyon at nakakatanggap ng mga benepisyo, gayon din ng suporta na kailangan nila upang pangunahan ang laban natin sa COVID-19. Kukuha rin ng karagdagang 10,000 health workers ang gobyerno upang matulungan ang ating mga doktor at nurse sa pagganap sa kanilang tungkulin. Sa ngayon, wala pang gamot o bakuna laban sa virus, kaya naman mahalaga na makipagtulungan ang lahat upang mapigilan ang pagkalat ng COVID-19. Palaging sundin ang minimum health standards at manatili sa bahay hanggat maaari at iwasan ang non-essential travel. Nilalayo na National Action Plan Against COVID-19 na ito na makasagip ng buhay at matiyak ang ating kalusugan, kaligtasan at kinabukasan habang tayo ay bumabangon sa recession. Dahil kapag sama-sama, we heal as one.
There we are, the National Action Plan Phase 2, where our local plans to be anchored on. Moving on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is the current Presidential Advisor on Flagship Programs and Projects and the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Bases Conversion and Development Authority. So to introduce the National Code Team, we call on the Deputy Chief Implementer of the National Action Plan Against COVID-19. We have Sir Vivencio B. Dizon. Let's give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much po. First of all, on behalf of Secretary Del Lorenzana, Secretary Ed Año, and of course our Chief Implementer, Secretary Galvez, and the entire National Task Force, we want to thank Mayor Benji Magalong and his team for really making Baguio a model for not only for the response against COVID-19, but also now, more importantly, the response to start reopening the economy and get our lives back as we deal with the pandemic. Alam niyo po, bago ko po introduce ang ating mga partners sa DILG at sa National Task Force at sa DOH, meron pong napaka-striking na parte ng presentation kanina na pinresinta ng ating regional task force, no? Yung pong more than 18 billion pesos in losses, in economic losses ng Cordillera Autonomous Region. Uulitin ko po, no? 18 billion na po ang nawawala sa ekonomiya ng CAR habang tayo'y lumalaban sa COVID-19, no? Ang 18 billion na po yan, ang aktual na nawala dyan ay mga nawalang trabaho. Merong mga nawalan ng buhay, hindi dahil sa COVID, kundi dahil sa iba't ibang sakit na hindi COVID. Mga nawalang mga negosyo na nagsara dahil dito. At hindi po natin malalaman pa kung gaano kalaki pa ang mawawala sa mga susunod na buwan. Dahil matagal pa po itong laban na ito. Kaya napaka-importante po nating maintindihan yung perspektibong yon, no? Na essence nga ng National Action Plan Phase 2 na ngayon na nag-build na tayo ng kapasidad para mag-test, mag-trace, mag-isolate, mag-treat, kinakailangan dahan-dahan na nating buksan ng ekonomiya. Kaya Mayor Benji, napaka-importante po at pasensya na po, medyo nape-pressure kayo nationwide, no? Dahil nga kayo ang unang-unang magbubukas sa turismo. Pero napaka-importante po ng ginagawa ng City of Baguio at ni Mayor Benji para ipakita sa buong Pilipinas na kaya natin, no? Kaya nating i-manage ang COVID-19. Nakikita naman natin sa presentation ni Dr. Rowena kanina na may mga times na tumataas ang kaso, pero nakikita natin dahil sa PDITR na ginagawa ng Baguio, yung Prevent, Detect, Isolate, Treat, and Reintegrate, mabilis nilang napapababa ang kaso at nakokontrol nila. At dahil doon, kakayanin na nilang magbukas ng, ano yun, sir? Safely, ano yun? Slowly, safely, and surely. No? So, and I think it is a model that the entire country is looking at and will serve as an inspiration for our other local government units to follow. So with that po, Mayor Benji, maraming salamat sa iyong leadership at sa ginagawa niyo dito sa Baguio. Congratulations po, palakpakan po natin ang City of Baguio, no, sa ginagawa nila. So on behalf of Secretary Lorenzana, I just want to introduce ang ating code team na magpe-present ngayon. Pangungunahan po ni Undersecretary Marge Halusos ng DILG. She will be presenting Operation Listo. Ito yung ating best practices na ginagawa ng ating mga LGUs tulad ng Baguio. Susundan po siya ni National Incident Command and National Task Force Advisor Dr. Ofelia Saniel na magpe-present naman nung ating PDITR strategy and yung ating best practices din. And finally, kay Dr. Paz Corrales ng Department of Health, who will present something very important, yung pong ating operational framework para sa ating COVID-19 response sa mga workplaces, dahil nakikita nga natin na marami all throughout the country, hindi lang sa Baguio, marami sa ating mga kaso ay nanggagaling sa mga workplaces. So with that po, maraming salamat po umuli sa City of Baguio, and I'll turn it over now to Yusek Marge Husos of the ILG.
Pleasant day, everyone. To our host, Mayor Benji Magalong, Mr. Chair, General Secretary Lorenzana, Secretary Vince, to my fellow government workers and public servants, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. We are honored to be here with you today as we handhold together in this journey to beat COVID-19. You might ask why we are here and how we can create the difference together. Well, to commit work together requires understanding, a product of revealing one's intentions and listening to it. As such, you need to continue your pipeline health programs and projects you want to focus on depending on the realities of your locality. We recognize that the government cannot do it alone. Kaya kailangan po sama-sama tayong i-address ang COVID-19. The vision of the National Task Force is to make the people's live better, safer, and healthier, bringing back faith and trust also in the government. The key word here is malasakit. It begins with ourselves and in our homes and the communities. To beat this pandemic, we need to make this visible and tangible as we take an active part in this battle against disease amidst us. For Operation Listo, the Operation Listo protocol is intended to be maximized uniformly in actual operations. Along with the various pronouncements, this protocol anchors on the uniformity of the baseline of actions of the local task force, which is critical to control the spread of COVID-19 in the community level. Shown in the table of contents, it has 3 main chapters and has its own corresponding flowcharts. The flowcharts focuses on the sequential major activities, while the reference boxes are the listing of information, decision, points, and a specific detailed action. This is inspired by the Operation Listo protocols that is widely used by the LGUs today. For quick introduction, the community-based COVID-19 health event management hammer and dance approach offers an operational framework for LGUs to implement a localized response. The zoning containment strategy and PDITR strategy are major anchors on this localized implementation. It shows the community-based COVID-19 health event management approach, role in the localized implementation, ito po yung tatlo, and yung zoning containment. In this material, the PDITR components have respective minimum capacity targets for LGUs to take on in assessing and identifying the lockdown areas, building capacity, as well as response and operations. For a quick recap, the prevent, detect, isolate, treat, reintegrated is the main strategy of the National Action Plan against COVID-19 Phase 2. Pag sinabi pong prevent, wag na wag po natin kakalimutan mag-mask, at ang palagiang pagsasanitize, medyo malayo. Anyway, so nababasa niyo naman po siya. And detect is the active disease surveillance, aggressive contact tracing, katulad po na na-experience natin when we enter Baguio, expanded community testing, and isolate o plan kalinga, and treat, one hospital command, and reintegrate is yung minimum health standards, katulad po na in-explain na iba nating mga speakers, awareness for possible reinfection, social healing, and economic recovery, which yan po ang goal nating lahat na makabalik na po ang ating ekonomiya. Next slide, please. For the flowchart or LGU, first chapter is LGU General Action, and as shown is its flowchart. This chapter details the major fundamental lines of actions that LGUs will undertake in controlling the spread of the COVID-19 infection in their respective locality. It emphasizes major action and decision points and lines of directives that local chief executives will oversee and teams will operate on. It starts with the organization of the teams, assessment of the severity of infection, determining which areas to lock down, declaration by the local government unit, and concurrence by the RIATF, making appeals and prospective lifting after some time. Some steps have detailed action points and additional information as detailed in the reference boxes. Medyo malabo lang po, but I'm sure you have your copy. When a decision has been made to impose a lockdown, the succeeding slides shall explain in brief the zoning containment strategy and the specific actions to be undertaken according to the PDITR strategy, which is explained in the Chapter 2. Next slide, please. For a quick overview, with the operations geared towards adaptive, calibrated, and responsive control of the situation, local government units will be able to better manage the pandemic while minimizing the impact that broad-scale lockdowns have shown to effect. In turn, the precise geographic and targeted lockdowns is a balanced effort in reducing the socio-economic impact while also restoring a semblance of normalcy in affected communities nationwide. We anticipate that no single containment measure by itself will be sufficient to stop the spread of this virus with 100% success. But then, we combine the ZCS and PDITR strategies, we will be able to intervene early and stop the further spread of the pandemic in the locality. For zoning containment strategy, this is what the zoning strategy at the local level looks like. For the first of the 5 strategies in prevention, serving as guide for prevention, the DOH presents the minimum public health standards and healthcare system capacity standards for COVID-19 preparedness and response. The second of the 5 strategies is DETECT. Active disease surveillance, contact tracing, and expanded testing falls under this umbrella. We will breeze through first with contact tracing. In implementing effective contact tracing activities, LGUs must be guided with the legal framework in doing this. Kanina po, na-explain na po lahat ng ating mga speakers regarding the contact tracing. The second under DETECT is TEST, expanding the testing of all subgroups. The National Task Force and the Department of Health present the capacity and operation targets for testing. For Oplan Kalinga, the third of the 5 strategies is isolate. Just the same, this strategy has both capacity and operations target. Treat is the last strategy that we're going to tackle for today. We are looking at the one hospital command in this slide, hospital capacity and waste management system, among others. And finally, reintegrate where social assistance, safety nets, and mental health support will be needed for a recovered individual to be reintegrated in the community. And slowly, we will be mainstreaming to the new normal. Lastly, Chapter 3, building capacity. While the efforts at the national and local levels are clearly underway, there is a need to be constantly increase the capacity of the local government units to continue to implement the PDITR strategy effectively. Yan po yung mga prevent, detect, isolate, treat, reintegrate. Yan po yung pinakamalaking makakatulong sa atin para makabalik sa old normal na tinatawag. This is done through numerous capacity development interventions that are detailed in this chapter. Furthermore, the need to continuously build capacity is critical in the increase of human resource for health, local health systems, and biosafety infrastructures, as well as institutional programs that sustains mental health, nutrition outcomes, and social assistance and safety nets. By doing so, it helps ensure the effectiveness of the interventions that are delivered through the LGU, thereby improving the chance of reducing and eliminating the virus from parts of the whole of localities. That concludes my presentation, and if ever we have the slides for the best practices of Cebu and ano yung isang city? Paranaque and the other one? Nabotas. I'll just ask the Secretariat to play it in the
Yes.
monitor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Yusek Marge. We now turn it over to Dr. Offie. Magana?
Ayun na daw yun.
Okay. Ayun na. Okay. Sige po. Okay. Ma'am, thank you.
Okay, we move on to the presentation of the operational framework of COVID-19 response in workplaces. We call on Dr. Paz Corrales of the Department of Health.
Thank you, Ma'am. Good afternoon to all of you. Mayor Magalong, Secretary Lorenzana, Secretary Vince, and my fellow health workers and public health workers. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. We should not forget our employees, our health, not only the health workers, but also our co-employees in the different workplaces, more especially here in Baguio, where you will open up your place for tourism. Please let us not forget our employees. So this is just a short guide so that we could be guided as to what we must render, the benefits, the services that must be done. I wouldn't anymore deal with this slide because it has already been discussed. So the existing operational framework in workplaces, the overarching is the National Action Plan, Phase 2, which balances health and economy. When you increase the economy, you do not forget the health of our people because they are the most precious commodity in our, especially in our pandemic now environment. So for the private workplace, you have the DOLE, the civil service, and the DOH joint memorandum circular, and also with the government workplace, you also have some memoranda that has already been issued, and I wouldn't go into this anymore. And all of the both private and government workplace has only one goal, and that is to have one operational framework for workplaces, and which is anchored on the PDITR strategy of the National Task Force. So the guiding principle is COVID-19 response is national government enabled, locally led, and people-centered. As I have mentioned earlier, it's a balance between health and economy, and we wish to improve participation of the community and also the stakeholder, and increase support for the people, and furthermore advocate ownership for the stakeholders because they are the ones that are very much affected. Now, to have a successful pandemic response, there is a need to have a strong private and public partnership. As mentioned earlier by the previous speakers, the government cannot do it alone. And lastly, we have to ensure business continuity. Hindi po tayo makakausad kung ang ating ekonomiya ay nasa laylayan. So yung PDITR strategy, hindi ko na po isa-isahin ito, nabanggit na rin po ito, kaya lang po sa susunod na slide, ang prevent po. We should have a building workplace systems and capacities. Ibig sabihin po sa ating mga lugar na nagtatrabaho, kailangan po meron tayong tigakuha ng temperature, meron tayong occupational safety officer, meron po tayong unidirectional flow, iba po ang entrance, iba ang exit ng mga tao. Nakikita ko po ito kung saan ho kami nakatira ngayon, sa Manor. Very strict po sila. Palagay ko po ito ho ay dahil kay Mayor Magalong. Yung kanya pong prinsipyo na kailangan sundin para ho sa kabutihan ng lahat. And we also have to ensure workplace safety. Makikita niyo naman po na merong mga alcohol kahit saan kayo pumunta, and everybody should wear the mask and face shield, including inside the church. So we have risk communication, which should be done properly so that people will understand what is going on. And you should have workplace code team also. Even in our workplace, we should have prevention, isolation, treatment, testing, and reintegration. Next, please. So, the workplace has to have policies. Ito po ay base sa mga circular ng DOLE, ng DTI, ng DOH. You should have an occupational safety and health officer or a committee. And you should train the workplace health human resource and employees. Kasi po, kung may sakit ang isang empleyado, hindi ho na natin sila papapasukin. Dapat po alam ho ng ating HHR kung paano, how to deal with them. Dapat po tayong ay merong din isolation facility para sa kanila. At dapat po sinisiguro natin na sila ay matitest. Once na-test po ang ating empleyado, kailangan po naka-isolate na po yan. Huwag na po nating hihintayin ang resulta. Isolation starts at the time when the employee is tested, not when the result is out. So in front of you is the composition of the Occupational Safety and Health Committee. And then the functions, the different functions. Next, please. There, you also have to comply with the minimum public health standards, should have a safe workplace area, a safe transportation. Ito ho ay pinag-away-awayan na ng ating mga nakakataas. At ngayon po, nagsabi na ho ang ating presidente, we maintain the 1 meter distance even in safe transportation. Safe dining, hindi ho pwedeng magkakasama tayong lahat sa mga kainan natin. Nalalaman niyo naman po na we cannot be close to each other. Safe distance is maintained. Safe accommodation in the hotel. There should be 2 beds with 1 meter distance inside a room. This goes with the hotels here. And it should also be disinfected. Once yung occupant po ay umalis, dapat po i-disinfect yan. Ang ruling pa nga ho every 4 hours. Dapat din i-disinfect. At saka ho yung ating mga telepono, yung ating mesa sa opisina, kailangan po din i-disinfect yan. Meron pong required ang DOH kung anong solusyon, sodium hypochlorite with the right dilution. Kasi po meron na pong incident na masyadong pure ang nagamit na chemical solution where the patient died. So you have to be careful about this. Right in front of you is the commonly used disinfectant and the prescribed one. And meron po itong dilution, hindi po pwede puro. So chlorine solutions must be freshly prepared every day. Thoroughly clean the surfaces first with soap and water before using the hypochlorite solution. And also dilute hypochlorite solution with non-turbid water. Next, please. The Department of Health does not recommend spraying and fogging. Hindi na po ito pinapayagan ng Department of Health. Next, please. For detect, we have to use active and passive surveillance, contact tracing, and testing. Hindi ko na iisa-isahin yan. Masyado na pong na-discuss yan ni Mayor Magalong. And screening at the points of entry, we also have to regularly self-monitor and report. Meron pong mga empleyado na hindi po sila nagre-report dahil ayaw nilang mag-absent, lalo na po yung no work, no pay. We have to tell them, we have to let them understand na hindi po ito para lang sa sarili nila, pero para po ito ho sa buong komunidad. So you have to tell them that once you feel the fever, the cough, the colds, no taste, no smell, please report it to the human resource manager so that the necessary isolation and testing can be done. And of course, you report this to the Epidemiology Bureau of the city and the regional office also here in Baguio. These are different steps. When a person enters at the point of entry in your different workplaces and even in the shopping malls, the hotels, even the market. Next, please. Masyado lang hong detalyo ito. Hindi ko na po iisa-isahin, sir. Sige po. Next, please. Very important po yung self-monitoring and reporting. This is very important and it is very hard to do. But once a person is, this is explained to them, I guess they will understand. Next, please. And then let us not forget the reporting of such diseases in the different disease reporting units. Next, please. And of course, dito naman po yung ating champion, yung superman ng ating contact tracing. So, importante rin ho ito. Huwag nyo na hindi po ibig sabihin na kung kailan lalabas ang result, doon pa lang ho tayo magsisimula mag-contact tracing. This is very important. And in National Capital Region where I came from, it's still, the ratio is still 1:5, but we have doubts if this is really 1:5. There are many factors which makes contact tracing very hard, but we have to realize that this is very important and in fact the most important in stopping the transmission of COVID-19. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, I think this is a repetition already. Next. In terms of testing, you have the expanded testing in the private and public sector. The Department of Health has already drafted or has already have this. We have the guideline where there is where it is indicated the frequency, how often should a health worker or a person be tested. There's a once a week, once every 2 to 4 weeks, and once every quarter. Depends on the exposure to a COVID-19 patient. And depends on the environment, most especially in the workplace. Hindi ho lahat every 7 days. Depende po yan sa gaano ka-expose ho sa isang pasyente na may COVID-19. Next po. Sige po. Ito po yung Republic Act 1133-2 na kailangan magre-report na po. May penalty po na kasama dyan. Pag hindi re-report, may imprisonment din po ng 1 month to 6 months na nagre-range po. So ito po ay reporting ho ito ng mga kaso kasi po may iba ho tayong mga kasamahan, tinatago po nila. Sige po. Now, we must provide individual isolation or quarantine areas, and this is taken care of by Oplan Kalinga in the National Capital Region, and we also have some community quarantine places. Dito po, kung kayo po ay may sa hotel, kailangan po may individual isolation area kayo para sa mga empleyado. Sige po. Next po. Minsan po, mahirap kuhanin o tanggalin ang isang tao sa bahay niya kasi ayaw niya ho, syempre ho, ayaw nilang mahiwalay sa family. Gusto nila, doon sila sa safe zone nila. Kailan po, mahirap po yun kasi nga ho, karamihan po ay hindi na naniniwala sa home quarantine kahit po sila ay may sariling banyo o sariling kwarto kasi lalo pong lumalala ang transmission ng COVID-19. So you have localized lockdowns also in the office, in the building, in an establishment, as mentioned earlier in the video presentation. Next, please. And as in Executive Order number 112, series of 2020, the local chief executive, the mayor in a municipality or a city where the workplace is located is authorized to impose, lift, or extend community quarantine intervention based on respective parameters to geographical units or the workplace with the concurrence of the regional IATF. So, si Mayor po ang magdidesisyon, kailan gagawin, kailan impose, kailan ililift yung ganon lockdowns. Sige po. Meron lang pong I don't know if it's controversial here, but there are a lot of employers who still would request a negative result. Kasi po sa DOH, sinasabi mayroon pong guideline na hindi na kailangan kumuha ng isa pang negative result para bumalik ang isang empleyado sa trabaho. Still, may mga bosses, may mga kumpanya po na hindi pa ho sumusunod doon. Then the last step for the PIDTR strategy is recovery and reintegration. Please consider that these people who are COVID positive are sometimes nahihiwalay, I forgot the term, nahihiwalay na iiba. Ayaw silang tanggapin sa kanilang mga bahay, sa opisina, parang sila ay may sakit na nakakahawa. And there are so many people already, there are so many cases of depression, anxiety because of COVID-19. And there are even cases of suicide already, though the reports are not yet that big, there are already existing cases. We have to consider this, and we have to help our employees. The mental health should be considered in all our workplaces or work units, especially to those who are going back, who have completed the 14 days quarantine. Let us not forget them. After all, they are also human beings. Next, please. I think this is the last slide. So, gaya po ng sinasabi ko madalas, hindi po kaya ito ng ating gobyerno. Tayo po ay magsama-sama, gaya po ng sinabi, we heal as one. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat at maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Paz Corrales of the DOH. Moving on, let's have an AVP on good practices of Navotas.
Yan po. Ang requirement po ng DOH is one bed for 2,500 residents. Yan po ang requirement for isolation facilities for mild.
Navotas po ay nagtayo
tayo ng 100 beds nung una kasi yan po ang requirement. Ngunit nung nag-GCQ, we doubled the capacity. Ginawa po nating 210 bed capacity. Ngunit dahil nung first week of July, tumaas masyado yung cases sa Navotas, nagkulang po yung 210 bed capacity na isolation facility natin. Kaya ang ginawa po natin ay nag-request po tayo ng lockdown noon at pinayagan naman ng IATF. Ngunit kasabay ng lockdown na yon, hindi naman po pwede yung lockdown na wala tayong gagawin. So ang napaka-importante ng lockdown is yung taasan yung number of tests. No? So from 200 a day, next slide please. From 200 a day, umakyat tayo hanggang sa capacity na 2,000 tests per day. No? Meron tayong community swabbing sa Navotas LGU at meron din sa Palasyo. Yan po ay sa tulong ng national government. Okay. Next slide please. Tapos sa Navotas po, hindi lang po Navotas residents ang pwede magpaswab. Pati po yung mga may empleyado na hindi tiga Navotas pero ang kumpanya ay nasa Navotas, ini-encourage po natin magpaswab. Dahil siyempre po, pag isang non-Navoteño ay pumasok sa isang trabaho sa Navotas, ang mahahawaan niya karamihan na botenyo. Okay? Next slide, please. Ngayon, ito po yung sinasabi ni Secretary Harry Roque na isolation. No? So, dito ho nagsisimula sa taas. Madedetermine muna yung primary case. Pagkatapos po ma-determine yung primary case ay tatawagan po ng doktor at sasabihin na siya ay nag-test positive sa COVID-19. Napakahalaga po na within 24 hours, ma-contact trace po siya, ma-interview po siya ng ating contact tracing team na pinamumunuan ng PNP, kasama ho ang health, tsaka yung mga BHW at yung birth. Dapat within 24 hours po, malaman kung sino yung close contacts niya. Ngayon, pagkatapos niyang ma-interview dahil sa close contacts, kailangan na po siyang dalhin sa community isolation facility. So as a policy, hindi po kami pumapayag ng home quarantine. Dahil based sa experience namin, ang hirap po bantayan ng home quarantine. Hindi na po yan nababantayan. So kailangan po lahat po na mag-turn out positive ay dadalhin doon sa community isolation facility. Ngayon, pag nag-refuse po, pinapaalala po namin yung provisions ng RA 11332. Next. Pagkatapos po madala sa CIF yung nag-positive, yung mga close contact naman niya ay dapat din matest po lahat. Hindi po pwede silang tubanggi kung sila po ay na-identify na close contact. No? Ganon din po ulit. Pag ayaw nila, papaalala po ulit sa kanila yung provisions ng RA 11332. No? Na hindi po sila pwede mag-refuse. Ngayon, nagkaroon kami ng konting revision doon sa close contact. Pag test pa lang ng isang close contact, hinihingi na namin yung naging close contact din niya. Para kung sakaling siya ay mag-positive, ang mangyayari doon ay meron ng preliminary close contact list na siya na binigay. So, tatawagan ulit siya kung siya ay mag-positive and then para madagdagan yung mga close contacts. No? So, naglagay na rin kami ng close contact tracing form bago i-swab test. And then, yung close contact na yon should go quarantine until lumabas yung results. And then, balik na naman tayo. Pag naging primary case, balik na naman doon sa proseso na yon. Next slide, please. Ito lang po yung napakahalaga na provision ng RA 11332, no? Na pag hindi sila pumayag sumama sa community isolation facility o hindi sila pumayag magpa-swab, may fine po yan na 20,000 to 50,000 at may imprisonment po yan from 1 month to not over than 6 months. No? Of course, merong mga exempted po doon sa community isolation facility, katulad yung mga buntis o yung mga nagpapa-breastfeed, hindi po yan nadadala sa community isolation facilities. Pero very limited po yung exemption. Ito naman po ay tulong rin ng national government. Nagdala ho sila ng 40 container vans that they are now converting to isolation facilities. Magiging 120 beds po yan. Kaya namin gusto magdagdag ng beds is because ang idea namin is pag swab pa lang, dapat nasa isolation facility. So pag natapos po itong 120 beds na to, plus yung 210 beds ng Navotas, ang gagawin namin, yung sa Navotas, gagamitin lang namin for those waiting for the results. Ibig sabihin, yung mga na-swab, na close contact, na nag-iintay ng resulta, kailangan dyan muna sila sa isolation facility. At pwede silang umuwi kapag sila ay naging negative. Kung sila ay naging positive, dadali naman natin sila doon sa National Isolation Facility. So, yun lang po. Diyan po nagtatapos yung ating presentation. At syempre, papasalamat po ako sa IATF, sa NTF, dahil hindi po namin makakayanan ito kung hindi po dahil sa tulong nila. So, maraming salamat po at maraming salamat, Sec. Harry.
There we are, the best practice of Navotas. So maraming salamat po to all presenters for the very insightful presentations. Now we give chance to the participants here for an open forum for your comments, questions, clarifications. We now open the floor for questions, comments. Anyone? Yes, Secretary Lorenzana.
Comment lang sa mga presentation kanina, no? Because there were some things uttered na napaka-importante. Katulad nung no work, no pay na ayaw magtrabaho, ayaw mag-report dahil maku-quarantine, walang hanap buhay, magugutom yung pamilya. So ito nangyari ito sa Calabarzon. Calabarzon has about bilang libo ba yung mga ano dyan? More than 2,000 companies in Calabarzon. And the spike of the COVID there so rapid and so high. Now we found out that a lot of those workers who have been infected ayaw magsalita, ayaw magsabi dahil hindi sila papapasukin eh. Yung mga arawan, alam na yung mga arawan na, no, na sumusunod ng arawan, hindi na mag-report yan. So much so that entire families are infected. 7 members ng family infected na yun. So Secretary Mon Lopez, the DTI Secretary, is talking with the employers na kung ma-COVID man, hindi man lang siguro ay bigyan pa rin ng sweldo, kahit nakalahati, para lang may ikabubuhay yung pamilya. Pangalawa, yung isolation. This is also very tricky because a lot of people do not want to report dahil ayaw nilang mahiwalay sa kanilang pamilya. A case in point, I think about 1.5 weeks ago, I received this call from SOS. A mother who was in San Mateo, mayroon siyang COVID. May symptoms siya. No? So she was asking where she can isolate. So I referred her to the one hospital command. Tinungagan siya. Nung malaman niya na dadalhin siya doon sa Bulacan, yung ating isolation sa Bulacan, yung Iglesia ni Cristo Center, ayaw nang umalis. Layo masyado. Now, there is a solution to this because of the Bayanihan 2. We asked for some funds so that we can utilize the hotels to be isolation centers ng mga asymptomatic. Symptomatic ito, hindi ito yung symptomatic COVID, yung na-approve ito. So may pera tayo dito, Mayor. Gamitin natin ito. Now, we will be hitting 2 birds with one stone dahil may isolate na natin yung mga tao, hindi na takot mag-isolate dahil medyo komportable. Pangalawa, kikita rin yung mga hotels. So, maganda, win-win. So, win-win yan. Pangatlo, I think this is caution our barangays. Dahil doon sa Caloocan, meron din akong dumulog sa akin na meron siyang nilalagnat, inuubo. So ang sabi ko, pumunta ka doon sa barangay. Ayaw niya. Bakit? Kasi sir, pagtatawanan pa ako, wala namang gagawin. Tapos, baka mag-discriminate pa ako ng mga tao, mga doon. So that's the problem. I think we should trickle down the information to the barangays na pagka may nagpunta sa kanila, they should act on it immediately. Yeah. Hindi yung wala namang gagawin tapos pagtatawanan pa whatever. And it kills the enthusiasm of our people to cooperate in this campaign. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Secretary Lorenzana. Others? We also have, yes, ma'am. We have
Dr. Ellen. Doc Ellen po.
Dr. Eleanor Galvez.
Salamat. So, may mga observations lang ako sa presentation. Number one, doon sa sa Baguio in action. Yung meron something to learn from yung ating graphs. Yung pag-interpret ng graphs natin. Bali kasi may mga spikes. Bali on hindsight, and this is not just true for Baguio, na pag-aralan talagang maigi yung ating data, lalo na kapag ito ay dinidepict natin sa graphs. Yung mga spikes na yun kasi, lalo na ngayon, napaka-aggressive ng testing natin. Diba? So, it could be interpreted not because of the rising or resurgence of cases. Although, natuwa ako kasi sa Baguio, you're really on your toes na for possible resurgence. Pero most often, when we look at the graphs, kailangan talaga mong pag-aralang mabuti. Yung surge, yung spikes does not necessarily mean pangit na picture. No? Lalo na sa Baguio, hindi ako natatakot kasi lalo na handa kayo. I like how you said it. Meron kayong plan regarding trigger and response. Naka-in place. And then the second thing na na-emphasize din doon sa AVP natin sa presentation ng Navotas, and this is very glaring dito sa Baguio, yung ating contact tracing. Again, learning from this kasi we know that contact tracing is very crucial in identifying yung mga kaso. Kaya unfortunately, I think we need to be aware na not all LGUs are like Baguio. Kasi marami ng incidents that I know, like halimbawa may na-identify, merong na-report, but it takes time for the LGU to go visit the residents and swab or contact trace para i-check lang kung totoong suspect. No? So for instance, I know a family na 14-year-old, 3 days na siyang symptomatic. And then when reported, it took 8 days for the swabbing team to go. The more important thing kasi doon, sabi ko, 14 years old, yeah, she can survive, but she was living with 2 vulnerable individuals. Isang senior at isang lymphoma patient in remission. So you see, ang pinapakita sa atin sa contact tracing led by no other than our czar, Mayor Magalong, how important we really take to heart yung mga elements of contact tracing. It's not just a matter of activity. We need to really find out who we are contact tracing. And the team itself, nagbabari siya sa different LGUs, even the members. Ako nakita ko dun sa ang daming miyembro, and even sa Baguio, meron talagang isang doctor that goes with them. But this is not true for the other LGUs. And I think itong pagkakataong ito should be parang for us to learn and to find out kung ganito rin nangyayari sa iba. Kasi if this is if only Baguio is doing it, sabi nga namin kay Mayor Magalong, sana nare-replicate ang experience niyo o kaya naka-clone si Mayor. So yun lang. Kaya I'm just happy to be here in Baguio and learn from the Office of Mayor Magalong and his team, overseeing your situation to manage and contain COVID-19. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Eleanor Galvez. Yes, sir. We have the PMA Commandant, Sir Browner.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. I am happy to announce that PMA remains to be COVID-free. Unlike the other... thank you. Yes, ma'am. However, kanina I learned that Baguio is going to open already, sir, to tourists this September 22, Tuesday. We all know that PMA is also a tourist destination. Meron sana kaming request, sir, if we could exempt PMA from one of the tourist destinations that will be open this September 22. Maybe in the future, pwede na po, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Sumagot na si Mayor. Yes, Mayor.
Rest assured, Omet, rest assured.
Okay. We have Director Pebbles.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. First of all, I'd like to say that finally I'm home in the north. Kasi po matagal na panahon na hindi pa ako nakaka-uwi, ilang buwan na po. At ako po ay taga Pangasinan, Dagupan, but lagi po akong nalalagay sa Baguio City. So, ang gusto ko lang pong sabihin na if there's something that I would like to highlight in this visit, no, ng code visit, is that I would give the word cooperation, no, the big word cooperation. Rather, total aggressive cooperation po. This is the Baguio experience now, and probably, maybe we can say that this is the new normal that it is. So, we all know that it's called the City of Pines. It's the model of whole of the nation approach. No? Itong LGU na po, ito, at siguro sa mga iba pa pong LGUs, would say that this is the kind of whole of the nation approach that we actually are looking for. And very orderly, people are very disciplined. Even visitors, no, become very, very obedient with the system that the LGUs in other regions put in place, and the readiness that is really commendable, as well as the planning, no, from the planning stage of everybody getting involved. On the information aspect, ladies and gentlemen, as communicators, which tayo ay lahat ay may kakayahan na mag-inform, at sa panahon po ngayon, kailangan pong maging updated or in the know po tayo, or alamin natin ang information tungkol sa mga hakbang natin kontra COVID-19. Ang unang dapat nating gawin ay makipag-ugnayan at makinig sa ating mga LGU. Ako, I'm talking about ito ating mga kasamahan, no? At ang ating mga kababayan, hindi lang po tayong government. Para alam natin ang gagawin, because we know what to do, we save ourselves. Not only that, we also save others' lives, no? Other lives. So back to basics po tayo. Importante po ang behavioral change na ating kailangan i-embrace. Kung tayo ay araw-araw kumakain, yung habits po natin na araw-araw na pagising natin sa umaga, nagdadasal tayo, ituring po natin na yung mask, hugas at iwas na ginagawa po ng kampanya ng ating gobyerno, kaakibat din po dito ang DOH campaign na Be the Solution, para natin sa isip at lalong-lalo na maisapuso na ang pagsusuot ng mask at paghuhugas ng kamay, ang pagdidistansya sa mga sa isang metro ay kailangan para labanan ng COVID-19. And can I just say, napaka-present po dito sa Baguio. Kasi po, na-observe ko po, lahat po maayos magsuot ng mask. Yung mga naglalakad po, naka-mask po lahat, hindi po nakababa, no? Hindi talaga pong listong-listo na lahat talaga. Parang normal na sa kanila yung pagsusuot ng mask. So, nais ko ring bigyan ng commendation ng aming PIA CAR region, no? At kitang-kita po yung ginagawa nilang mga kapihan in coordination with the LGU, with Mayor Magalong, mga kasamahan namin sa government media, pati ang PTV, RP1 at PNA, pati na din ang puwersa ng media ng aming mga kasama dito na nagtutulungan para magbigay ng mga importanteng impormasyon para sa ating mga kababayan. So maraming salamat po sa ating mga kasama sa media. And sa fake news naman po, no, alam naman natin na aming tinututukan ng fake news at disinformation na nangyayari sa national at local. Sa tulong again po ng PIA at also ng LGU, para mabilis natin maputol ang disinformations, sa nakakagulo kasi ito sa kamalayan ng mga tao. Dito po talaga, alam niyo yung sa pinakahuli pong dapat nating mangyari sa ating mga kababayan ay, or dapat hindi mangyari, ay malito sila. So dapat mabilis po tayo, no, na mag-act. So kaya importante na dapat accurate at mabilis ang ating pagpapakalat ng totoo, at importante at makakatulong sa balita. Importante yung balita po natin o yung mga messages po natin ay makakatulong na balita sa publiko. It's also very important to have a full focus and know the real information so you know what to do in prevention, to defend ourselves, and more so, if we have it, we keep our faith, no? Importante yung faith that we will beat this COVID-19. Pag nagkaroon po tayo ng COVID-19, lakasan po natin ang loob natin, no? Again, if we know a lot of things about this, how to beat COVID-19. We save ourselves, we save lives. Again, let me reiterate, slowly, sabi nga dito sa Baguio, surely, safely. S3 po. So, ako naman, gusto ko naman pong magbigay ng mensahe sa ating mga visitors dito na gusto pong pumunta sa ating Baguio City, no? Alam naman natin na napakaganda ng lugar na ito. We go to Baguio City and other cities like this when we have to obey and follow. Okay? You will experience the not just Baguio that we already know from before, but the beautiful Baguio that it is now. And what I'm saying is that it is safe, secured, assured. So mararamdaman mo na everything is in place. So this is the new Baguio experience now. So yun lang po. Maraming salamat po, Mayor Benji. Maraming salamat po sa ating mga kasama sa gobyerno.
Maraming salamat po. Siya ang boss namin sa PCOO, popularly known as Pebbles Duque. Ang tunay po niyang pangalan ay Florinda Princess Espinilla Duque. And she's the head of the Bureau of Communications Services. But today, representing PCOO, Secretary Andanar. Okay, we move on to other concerns. Yes, ma'am, from DND.
Yung may ay.
Good afternoon. Actually, ma'am, taga-ano po ako? OPAP, Office of the Presidential Advisor on the Peace Process. But at the same time, as you know, si Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. po yung ating naatasan na Chief Implementer. So, dual role po kasi yung last time din na nasa Baguio ako, na-mention ko rin kay Mayor Benji, was with reference to the other work that we do pertaining to the CPLA work naman po. So, for today, meron lang din po akong reflection with regard to the presentation of the Baguio City. I think it's very timely and thankful ako that I was able to listen to the presentation, particularly doon sa tourism plan. Kasi po we are already crafting the phase 3 of the National Action Plan against COVID-19. So we are looking at the different aspects based po dun sa ating code team visits and yung mga good practices in different areas na pwede nating i-adopt doon sa ikatlong yugto ng ating NAP. So yun po, baka po later on, sir, we can request yung inyo pong resource person if we can share also this presentation doon sa ating inter-task group meeting. I think it's also an opportunity for other regions to look at that particular model as we move on to the continue sustaining the balance of health and economy. So, ayun sir. So, thank you. And yun din po, as OPAP naman, kasi it's important also for us to look at this items because alam natin sa conflict-affected areas, nagkakaroon ng double vulnerability yung ating mga vulnerable sector. Kaya as much as possible, we also want to ensure na ma-manage natin yung COVID dahil later on din po, it may also aggravate the vulnerabilities and sustainabilities in the conflict-affected areas. So thank you, sir, and good afternoon.
Maraming salamat, ma'am. Siya po si Ms. Vanessa Pagliorco of OPAP, part of the code team visit in the different regions. Okay. Let's take advantage of everyone's presence today. Yes, sir. Secretary Lorenzana.
Dagdag alaman. Dagdag. Yeah, this virus, kung nakikita niyo yung mga graph na yan, nagsa-surge yan gumaganon. Now, if there is a surge, don't panic. That is normal sa virus na ito. Biglang lalabas. Remember that the incubation period is, mag-start yan 5th day. So, it's impossible for us to capture everybody na infected. So, normal yan, kalat-kalat yan, mag-infect na naman. Then, sabay-sabay na lalabas yan. Now, all we have to do is activate the measures and the weapons that at our disposal to contain it. Tingnan niyo yung graph ng Baguio. Pakyat, bigla. Ganun. Ang ganda ng, that is the best way to control this. Pagka lockdown, whatever measures you want to do para bababa ulit. Siyempre, gagano na naman yan. Hanggang sa konti na lang yung surge ko ng palit. Remember that all countries experience this surge. Personally, hindi ako naniniwala ng second wave dahil wala namang darating na bagong virus na another wave na gano'n Nandyan na yung virus na yan, pumuputok lang. Ngayon, dapat ibang contain natin. So don't panic. Yung hindi, kasi ginagawa ng media kasi they are sensationalizing it, mataas. But that's not, hindi yan it is not concerning, but not really catastrophic na pagka nag-surge ng surge. All you have to do is activate, sabi ko nga, yung ating mga measures, and we'll be okay. Thank you.
Okay, maraming salamat, Secretary. Yes, Congressman Marquez.
Thank you very much. Siguro bilang kasagutan sa sinabi ni Secretary Lorenzana, kami po dito sa Baguio, Secretary, hindi po kami nagpapanik. Dahil kami po ay may tiwala at ang confidence namin sa aming syudad ay napakataas. Kasi merong correlation yung confidence mo at saka yung panic. Kung wala kang confidence sa isang organisasyon, sa isang komunidad o kaya sa isang grupo ng liderato, talagang magpapanik ka. Pero dito sa atin, sa pinakita lang ng ating mga kasama dito sa Baguio, talagang ang confidence level, personally, ang confidence level ko napakataas. Hindi dahil ako'y congressman, kundi alam ko na pag may nangyari, alam ang gagawin ng syudad ng Baguio. Pag ikaw ay na-identify na positive, ngayon pa lang, meron ng aksyon ng gobyerno dito po sa lungsod namin. Kaya talagang ang confidence level napakataas Kaya hindi po kami nagpapanik dito sa Baguio. Kumbaga, alam namin na ang leadership ng local government ready na pa-address ito. At meron ng parang protocol na susundin para ma-address yung ganong sitwasyon. And with that, it really shows the kind of leadership that we have here in the city of Baguio. And we would like to thank, of course, our city mayor and the other government officials, plus yung ating Department of Health at lahat ng mga ospital na tumutulong dito. No? Very impressive yung presentation kanina. And you have no reason not to be confident that it can be addressed if in case you turn out to be positive. No? Hindi ka pa positive, binabantayan ka na Pag ganun ang sitwasyon, you don't even need to worry because things will really turn okay because our leaders know exactly what they're supposed to do. And this is what differentiates us, I think, from the other municipalities and cities. Hindi yung naghanap pa lang na solusyon dito. na-identify kang COVID, alam na, isolate ka, contact tracing yung lahat ng mga nakasalamuha mo. And preventive kagad ang approach eh. So again, we would like to congratulate our leaders here in the city of Baguio. And I know na maano natin to. Masusurvive natin ito sa lalong madaling panahon. And with the opening of our city on a, anong tawag natin yan? 3S. Surely, safely, and slowly. O yun. Napakaganda nga yan, yung 3S na yan. And knowing the fact that our leadership from the national government are helping us, mula kay Secretary Vince Dizon, kay Secretary Lorenzana, kay Secretary Galvez, Secretary Anyo, at yung bagong PNP ngayon, Chief, taga Baguio pa yan, dito sa atin. So all the support are here and present. So I think talagang dapat talaga maging modelo ang Baguio. So thank you at magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. Thank
Maraming salamat, Congressman Go. Yes, Secretary Vince Dizon.
Siguro sa kung ano lang, note lang on yung sinabi ni Kong Mark. No? Unang-una, ang nakita naming isa sa mga naging problema sa mga areas na medyo nahirapang mag-control nung spread, no? Is yung pagkakawatak-watak minsan ng mga leaders sa local government. No? And tingin ko again, Baguio serves as a very good example, gaya ng sinabi ni Kong Mark. No? One direction and one purpose ang Baguio. No? Critical, very, very critical po yon sa response. No? Hindi pwedeng nagwawatak-watak o nag-aaway ang mga leaders. No? Kaya congratulations po talaga kay Kong Mark and kay Mayor Benji and sa lahat ng leaders. Nandito po ang sanggunian ng Baguio, ang ating Vice Mayor. Yun ang pinaka-importante kasi hindi talaga pwedeng magkakanya-kanya. Kailangan talaga one direction, one purpose ang response. And again, Kong Mark, thank you very much po. Mayor Benji, congratulations. And critical po talaga yung unity sa leadership during this time. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Secretary Vince Dizon. Director Pebbles.
I-add ko lang po, no? Kanina po yung first time ko nga po uling umakit ng Baguio at na-experience ko yung triaging, no? Gusto ko lang i-discuss sa inyo na napakagaling nung triage. Kasi mula na pagpasok mo, nakapila na, di ba? So, bababa kayo, bibigyan niyo yung dokumento. Pero even bago pumunta ng Baguio, kailangan mo mag-register muna. So, it's really prepared. When you go to Baguio, you really have to prepare your trip going here. It's not just anything, but you really, really have to prepare. But then when you come in, pagpasok mo po, from the process of them, yung ating mga frontliners po, na mga police, ay tinitignan nila yung mga dokumento, hanggat sa in-escort ka papunta sa triage, talagang alagang-alaga yung mga visitors natin. Other than that po, doon ko na-realize pwede pala, kahit dayo, pwede palang maging disiplinado, or pwede din palang maging,
sumunod.
Kung gustuhin, kung talagang gusto mong pumunta sa lugar na yun, gagawin mo gagawin mo lahat. So, napakagaling lang yung na-impose na system na para ma-enjoy mo yung Baguio, kailangan din namin, ma-welcome ka namin dito, pero kailangan din namin ng kooperasyon mo. So again, the triaging for me is one of the things that I really, really admire the most, no? And I hope that we can actually replicate that. Maybe there are other cities already who's been replicating that, but maybe other LGUs also can do that, so that your visitors also will have this safety feeling, no? You're not just only visiting na parang you wanna be parang vacation, but also, syempre, you also contribute to the public or the residents of the locality of Baguio. So, yun lang po. Maraming salamat po. And on behalf of Secretary Martin Andanar, salamat din po.
Okay, I can see Dr. Ofelia Sanyel.
Yes po, salamat. Kasi po ako isang public health na tao. Ang aking pong bachelor, aking master's at aking doctoral ay public health. So, public health po ako. Kasi nung nagpipresent ng data tungkol sa COVID, marami tayong nakikitang new cases, active cases, recoveries, and deaths. Ewan ko nga po kung gaano ba naintindihan na ba ng mga, lalo na ng masa, kung ano itong mga numerong ito. Well, para lang po siguro makakatulong sa layman. Pero po nating isipin na meron tayong isang balde, pero yung balde may tubig, may gripo sa ilalim, may lalabasan. Meron din siyang gripo sa ibabaw na pinanggagalingan ng tubig. Ang atin pong, pwede natin sabihin, yung laman, yun yung ating active cases. Sila po ang pinanggagalingan ng infection. Kaya hanggat maaari, ayaw nating maraming laman yung ating timba. So ano pwedeng gawin? Yung pong timba, pagbukas sa ilalim, nababawasan yung laman, yung mga active cases na nanghahawa o pinanggagalingan ng sakit, nababawasan. Kaso yan yung mga recoveries. Siyempre gusto natin maraming recoveries. Ayaw natin ng deaths kasi nagbabawas din po yung deaths eh. Pero yung recoveries, magastos po yan. Nandyan yung kailangan natin ng testing, kailangan natin ng isolation, kailangan natin ng quarantine, ICU beds, gamot, etc. Ano pa po yung pwedeng makabawas ng laman? Babawasan natin yung pumapasok na tubig. So ano yung paano pagpasok? Prevention po yun. Yun yung pinakamura na paraan para hindi madami ang mga active cases natin, yung mga nanghahawa. So, hindi po ba mas mura? Wear your face mask always. Wash your hands frequently. Don't touch your face, your eyes. At keep distance. So, yun po yung parang sa public health. At marami po akong estudyanteng nasa paligid ko. Yun po yung madaling ipakita na ayaw nating mapuno, ayaw nating marami. So, bawasan natin dito hanggat maaari. Hinaan natin yung pagpasok ng bagong cases by preventing occurrence of these new cases. Yun lamang po, salamat po. Yun po aking advocacy as public health worker. Masakma yung aking
Maraming salamat, Dr. Ofelia Sanyel. Of course, we also have with us, na-mention kanina about LCAC priority areas taken advantage during the pandemic. We have with us Procor Director Arwin Pagkalinawan.
Ma'am, sabi ko, wag na yan eh. Anyway, magandang hapon po sa inyo lahat. I just want to ask, I was inquiring whether yung pong ating restaurants, ready na po sila, sana, with the DTI restrictions, hoping that the police can help enforce more about discipline inside restaurants, like no loud talking allowed or maximum 1 hour dining only. You can only dine with your family. Hindi ka pwede mag-meeting sa mga restaurants. Sana meron ho tayong ganun na may implement for September 22. Yun lang. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, Director Arwin. Mayor, would you like to comment?
I will comply, Arwin. I will comply. Hey, Arwin, pag-usapan natin. Thank you. Malaking bagay yan. Thank you.
Okay. The others? We also have here OWA and DFA. Would you like to add on or clarify concerns? Director Manuela Peña of OWA.
Matanong ko lang si Mayor. Thank you po yung suporta nyo doon sa OFWs. Matanong ko lang po kasi may bagong I read yesterday po kasi yung proclamation from Malacanang, is that 1021 po, extending po yung ating state of emergency. Extending the state of emergency because of COVID from September 13 up to this year up to September 2021. Ang ibig po rin bang sabihin, Mayor, and Secretary Lorenzana, yun po bang regulation and assistance sa pagbabalik ng mga OFWs would still be continuing? 1 year din po kaming free transportation, 24 hours ang contribution din sa OWA. Mabuti na lang may mga PNP at saka LGU na matulungin sa amin, DILG. Hindi po yan. Tuloy-tuloy po ba yung operation na po yun? Or shall we regulate also the ingress of OFWs from abroad? Talaga pong SOP yun, sir, yung i-hotel namin doon sa Manila.
Tuloy-tuloy pa rin yun, Director. No? Kaya nga, yung NDRRMC, which also chair, recommended to the President for the extension of the state of emergency because of COVID for 1 year. Ano? Importante yan kasi even the LGUs want that so that they can continue using their bayanihan funds as an emergency measure. Ano? Mahihirapan sila kasi mag-clear pagka hindi na emergency. So, tuloy pa rin yung mga ayuda natin sa mga OFWs na umuwi.
Thank you, sir. Kasi na-ask ko lang po doon dahil yung involvement po. Salamat po. Second, kailan po kaya available yung vaccine? Do we project? Do we have any information kung available na? Yung talagang
everybody is hoping that the vaccine will be available sooner. Marami nagsasabing mga bansa na malapit na. China is already testing, Russia also, the United States, and Mr. Trump is hoping that the vaccine will be available before the election. But sabi naman ng mga pharmacist, mahirapan. So still, everybody is doing it very slowly because according to the health scientists, hindi pwedeng madaliin itong paggawa ng vaccine. Talagang stages ito. According to what I read, mabilis na yung 2 years eh. So, we will be still in this fight against COVID or maybe the next 1.5 years. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Maraming salamat, Director Peña. Okay. Yes, Ms. Vanessa.
Ma'am, I would just like to thank everyone, yung mga kinulit po namin. I know like yung na-mention po ni Mayor kanina earlier, initially we planned for a citywide code team visit, but to maximize the presence of the NTF chair, we have modified it to become a regional level code team visit. And this is the second regional level, na ang nauna po ay Region 3, and ito po yung code team visit natin at this point. We would like to thank everyone, especially yung office po ni Mayor Magalong for the very well-prepared po na mga setup. And yung pong mga partner agencies natin, the RTF CAR, thank you sir for kasi even yung short notice na nagulat po siya na may regional level na nga po ito. Of course, ma'am, kayo rin po sa PIA, the DILG, and all the DOH po. Yung kasama rin po natin actually today, sila ang DOH members natin. We have ASEC Cha is over there. We have Director Gloria Balboa. And we have VILG po, siya yung ating focal for the management of the dead, si Mr. Rob Lim. So, yun lang po. So, thank you again, everyone, for the very warm welcome and very well-prepared setup.
Okay, no more comments, questions, clarifications. So in short, a span of time, we're given the chance to have very meaningful discussions and presentations. For the improvement of government response to this health crisis we are facing, and to wrap up, may we call on the chairperson of the Regional Task Force Against COVID-19 and the OCD Cordillera Director, Albert Mogol, for the closing message.
To our distinguished chair of the National Task Force Against COVID-19, my boss, Secretary Lorenzana. Sir, kami po ay, on behalf of the Cordillera RTF COVID-19 and the Cordillera RDRMC, with all the regional directors and officers here with us today, and all local government units, particularly the City Government of Baguio, who hosted this activity. Kami po ay nagpapasalamat sa inyong pagbisita dito sa Cordillera. Indeed, we become more resilient and stronger when we unite for one purpose. And this commonality of purpose keeps us on track and aligned in our response operations against COVID-19. This is another milestone for the Team Cordillera, another historic moment wherein the code team gets to see how we here in the Cordillera actually do it. The collaboration, best practices, and the notable accomplishments and DRRM contributions of everyone, truly one government, one voice, one Philippines. So makakaasa po kayo, sir, the honorable guests, and the members of the code team, makakaasa po kayo at ang national government na ang buong samahan ng regional agencies sa Cordillera at ang sambayanan ng Cordillera ay kaisa sa mahusay at matatag na pagsugpo ng pandemya. Hindi kami bibitaw sa laban hanggang sa tuluyang wakasan o magwakas ang pagsubok na ito. Ganyan po ang Team Cordillera. We get things done together. And so without further ado, maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat, lalong-lalo na po sa code team, sa pangunguna ng ating Secretary Lorenzana. Together, let us maintain Cordillera solidarity and resilience. Together, we will heal as one, we will recover as one, and ultimately, we will rise as one. Mabuhay po tayong lahat at magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
May photo up pa ba? Gusto pa ba nila mag-photo up? Photo up? Teka lang. Baka mag-ambush interview. Thank you.